and I wanted to do something different. And I just feel like I am all over the place. You know, this is like, I listen to all different styles of music, and that's where I get my joy from, is being a producer.
Bruno Mars gave the world some of the most unforgettable love songs of the 21st century. But in real life, he couldn't save the relationship that lasted 13 years. He filled stadiums, broke records, and became one of the biggest hitmakers alive. But while the world was dancing to his music, Bruno was carrying a loss that nearly broke him. His mother died while he was on tour, and he never got the chance to say goodbye. Behind the smile, the silk shirts, and the perfect stage presence is a man who paid a painful price for success. Today, we look past the Grammys, the billions of streams, and the flawless performances to uncover the heartbreak, sacrifice, and quiet wounds Bruno Mars has carried for years. The first spotlight and the pitch-black nights. Bruno Mars first stepped on stage when he was only 4 years old. His family performed in Waikiki, and before long, he became the show's little star. They called him Little Elvis. By 5, he was performing in front of 40,000 people. By 6, he was on national television. Before he was even 10, Bruno had already done nearly 1,000 shows. Then everything changed. When Bruno was 12, his parents divorced. The family act fell apart, and the money disappeared. Soon, Bruno, his father Pete, and his brother had no real home. Some nights, they slept in the back of a yellow 1993 Cadillac. Other nights, they stayed on a rooftop in Waikiki. At one point, they even slept in an abandoned zoo, kept awake by the cries of peacocks through the night. With no bathroom, they had to sneak into hotel pools just to clean themselves. Dinner was often cheap Spam musubi from 7-Eleven. For 5 months, they lived without electricity. Bruno practiced guitar under the moonlight because there was no power for an amplifier. Years later, Bruno revealed one detail that says everything about his father's love. Every night, before they slept, Pete hid Bruno's last pair of performance shoes under his pillow. He was afraid someone would steal them. More than that, he still believed his son would return to the stage one day. Bruno never forgot that. The key to that old yellow Cadillac is still in his wallet. At school, kids laughed at his thrift store clothes. But Bruno kept going. At night, he performed as Michael Jackson for tourists and earned $75 a show. That money helped pay for demos and bus rides to school. At 18, Bruno told his father he was leaving Hawaii. But to buy the plane ticket, he had to do the one thing he once promised himself he would never do. $600 and a name from Mars. Bruno sold his first guitar, the same one his father had saved for 6 months to buy. When Pete Hernandez dropped him off at the Honolulu airport, people close to the family said he barely spoke. He only placed a hand on Bruno's shoulder, held it there for a moment, then walked away. Bruno arrived in Los Angeles in June 2003 with $600, 3 demo CDs, and a new name on his luggage tag, Bruno Mars. The name had history. His father had called him Bruno after wrestler Bruno Sammartino, and Mars came from a girl who once told him he seemed so confident he must be from another planet. But Los Angeles did not welcome him gently. Record labels wanted to turn him into a Latin pop product. They wanted Spanish songs, a cleaner image, and a version of Bruno that felt easy to sell. Bruno refused. His first year was brutal. He moved from cheap motels to crowded apartments. He took a DJ job, even though he had no real experience, and was fired 2 nights later. Some weeks, his meals were 99-cent tacos, just so he could survive. In 2004, Motown signed him. Bruno thought his life had finally changed. But 9 months later, the label dropped him without releasing a single song. He had already told his family he made it. Now, he had to call home and admit it was over. That night, Bruno broke down in a backstage bathroom. A roommate later remembered that he stayed silent for the rest of the night. By the next day, Bruno had decided he would write songs no one could ignore. The man beside him had also been dropped by Motown. Together, they would become the songwriting team that changed everything. The backseat of a Toyota, where an empire was born. That man was Philip Lawrence. He and Bruno made a quiet promise to each other. They would write songs so strong that record labels could not ignore them anymore. They had no real office. Just the back seat of a 1999 Toyota Corolla parked outside a small Hollywood studio owned by engineer Ari Levine. Ari had the equipment. Bruno and Philip had the ideas. Together, they worked through cheap 7-Eleven meals and recording sessions that often lasted until morning. When something sounded right, they called it a smeeze. That inside joke became their name, the Smeezingtons. They studied more than 1,000 hit songs and worked 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. The first real break came through Bruno's sister, Jaime. She passed their demo to Mike Lynn, one of Dr. Dre's trusted people. At first, he nearly tossed it aside because Bruno's voice sounded unusual. But then one high note made him stop and listen again. That moment opened the first door. To survive, the Smeezingtons sold some of their best songs. Lost went to Menudo for $20,000. Then their hook for Flo Rida's Right Round helped send the song to #1. After that came Nothin' on You for B.O.B., another massive hit. Before Bruno ever released his first solo single in 2010, songs he helped write for other artists had already sold more than 15 million downloads. Then Bruno finally stepped into the spotlight on his own. But the same week his debut album came out, he was arrested, a painful detail most people barely mention today. A global pop explosion, and the arrest no one mentions. On May 11, 2010, Bruno Mars released his debut EP, It's Better If You Don't Understand. It had only 4 songs, lasted 13 minutes, and sold 27,000 copies. Almost no one noticed. 5 months later, everything changed. His debut album, Doo-Wops and Hooligans, was released on a modest $70,000 budget. It went 7 times platinum in the United States and sold 15 million copies worldwide. In the UK, it stayed on the charts for 400 straight weeks, longer than Abbey Road and Thriller. Then came Just the Way You Are. The song reached #1, stayed on the Billboard charts for 48 weeks, and became 13 times platinum. But behind that perfect love song was a much deeper pain. People close to the family have said the song may not have been written for a woman at all. It was reportedly inspired by one of Bruno's final voicemails from his mother, Bernadette, where she reminded him that he was beautiful just as he was. When she sent him off to Los Angeles in 2003, she hugged him and cried at the Honolulu airport. Years later, she would die from a brain aneurysm. But that heartbreak belongs to the next chapter. His next single, Grenade, became another monster hit, reaching #1 in 15 countries. Bruno was suddenly everywhere. But the same week his album exploded, he was arrested in Las Vegas for cocaine possession. He pled guilty, completed community service, and the incident was later cleared from his record. The media mostly moved past it. Still, it was the first warning sign of Bruno's complicated relationship with Las Vegas, a city that would come back into his story years later. At the 2011 Grammys, Bruno earned 7 nominations and won Best Male Pop Vocal Performance for Just the Way You Are. He became the youngest artist to win that award since Stevie Wonder in 1974. That year, he was even named the world's top-selling artist. Bruno was standing at the highest point of his life. Then, at 3 a.m., one phone call shattered everything. The 3 a.m. call and the unnamed grief. It happened during a show in Australia. Bruno was backstage when his team received a call from his sister, Jaime. Their mother, Bernadette, had suffered a brain aneurysm and was in critical condition. Bruno still had 4 songs left to perform. He went back on stage, smiled, danced, and finished the show. No one in the crowd knew his world was falling apart behind the curtain. As soon as the final applause ended, he rushed to the airport. But he did not make it home in time. Bernadette died before Bruno could return to Hawaii. He has never fully spoken about that loss in public. But people close to him say the years that followed were among the darkest of his life. At one point, he reportedly stayed inside his apartment for 3 straight weeks. Around that time, he wrote "When I Was Your Man," a song he once described as him bleeding onto the track. Many fans believe it was about Jessica, but some close to the family believe it may have carried a deeper grief, the pain of losing the mother he never got to say goodbye to. In 2016, Bruno quietly bought back his childhood home in Waikiki, the same home his family had lost after his parents divorced. He moved his father, Pete, back in so he could spend the rest of his life in the place they once lost. Later, a paparazzi photo showed Pete grocery shopping in Honolulu, with Bruno's Grammy medal around his neck. The photographer said Pete wore it every time he went out. Bruno reportedly learned about it only after the photo surfaced. The father who once hid Bruno's performance shoes under his pillow while they slept without a home was now proudly wearing his son's trophy through Honolulu. Bruno thought the darkest chapter of his life was behind him. He was wrong. The studio revolution. In October 2012, Bruno released Locked Out of Heaven. It started at number 34, then climbed to number 1, and stayed there for 6 straight weeks. With that, Bruno became the first male artist since Bobby Vinton in 1964 to score 4 number 1 hits within the first 2 years of his career. Not even Michael Jackson had done that. His second album, Unorthodox Jukebox, was a major risk. Bruno wanted to blend different genres into one record, but his label feared radio would not know what to do with it. Bruno trusted himself. He even gave up part of his future royalties to pay for live horns and vintage recording gear. The gamble worked. The album sold 6 million copies in its first year and won the 2014 Grammy for Best Pop Vocal Album. Then came Uptown Funk. What began as a simple voice memo turned into one of the biggest songs of the decade. It took 11 co-writers, survived multiple lawsuits, and stayed at number 1 for 14 straight weeks. By then, Bruno was no longer just a hitmaker. He was becoming a cultural force. In 2016, he delivered 24K Magic, a short 9-track album his label thought was too brief. Bruno refused to change it. He wanted every song to count. At the 2018 Grammys, the album swept Album, Record, and Song of the Year. Bruno won 6 awards in one night. The 24K Magic World Tour became massive. From 2017 to 2018, he performed 215 shows across 6 continents, sold 3.5 million tickets, and grossed nearly $368 million. At the first show, one quiet guest sat in the front row. It was an old friend from Bruno's struggling Koreatown days, the same man who once shared 99-cent tacos with him back in 2003. Bruno had reportedly flown him in by private jet. The man cried through the entire show. Bruno had reached the top of the world. But while the world was celebrating him, the woman who had anchored his private life was slowly slipping away. The collab empire and shattered glass at 4 a.m. At 11:47 p.m. at Dolby Live, Bruno Mars walked on stage in a gold tuxedo and announced that Silk Sonic was real. Minutes later, Leave the Door Open was released with Anderson .Paak. Within 4 weeks, the song reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. It later passed billions of streams and helped Silk Sonic sweep Record of the Year, Song of the Year, and Best R&B Performance at the Grammys. Their album, An Evening with Silk Sonic, was recorded on analog equipment and became a massive vinyl success. The residency that followed was short but incredibly profitable, bringing in millions each night. Bruno's perfectionism was still relentless. For one song, he reportedly recorded 16 versions of a single snare hit. Every detail had to feel right. Then, in August 2024, he teased fans with a message suggesting they would need tissues. Hours later, Die with a Smile with Lady Gaga was released. The song exploded instantly, dominated streaming, and became another emotional hit. At the 2025 Grammys, Bruno's vocal performance stunned critics, with some comparing his voice to a human saxophone. Behind the scenes, the pressure was brutal. Studio engineers said one vocal take was recorded after 4 a.m., after Bruno had pushed himself through take after take. In one frustrated moment, he reportedly threw a tequila bottle against the wall, and the sound of breaking glass remained in the final mix as a raw trace of his obsession. Then came APT with Blackpink's Rosé. The song debuted at number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100, making history for a female K-pop artist. When Bruno surprised fans during Rosé's set at SoFi Stadium, the crowd erupted so loudly it nearly swallowed the music itself. Bruno later shared that a PT was inspired by a night he and Rosé danced until dawn in Buenos Aires in 2019. The photos from that night still remained on his phone, a memory of a time when he felt free. But 2019 was not just another year of music. Back home in Studio City, while the world was celebrating his genius, Jessica Caban's quiet rejection drew a final line through the relationship that had once kept him grounded. From that moment on, things began to break beyond repair. The disappearing woman, the myth of the debt, and the father's shadow. Bruno and Jessica Caban met in 2011 at a hotel restaurant in New York. She had just finished a modeling audition, and he had just finished a show. They noticed each other across the room, and by the end of the night, they were still talking. Less than a year later, Jessica left New York and moved to the West Coast. In the beginning, she slept on an air mattress while Bruno was away on tour. By 2014, they were living together in Studio City with their dog, Geronimo. For more than a decade, Jessica stayed mostly out of the spotlight. Bruno rarely spoke about her, but in one interview, he called her his rock. People close to them say they had a private signal. Whenever Bruno emphasized the word rock during live shows, it was meant for Jessica, a quiet way of telling her he knew where she was in the crowd. In 2019, insiders claimed Bruno bought a $1.2 million engagement ring, but the proposal never became public. Some believe he tried and the timing was wrong. Others believe the relationship had already started to crack. Around that time, sources said Jessica nearly left after discovering Bruno had hidden a $2 million gambling loss from one night in Las Vegas. For many close to them, that was the first serious fracture. By late 2024, fans noticed Jessica had removed old anniversary posts from Instagram. In August, their dog Geronimo died. Some believe he had been the last emotional thread keeping them together. Weeks later, Bruno traveled to Tokyo alone, wearing a necklace Jessica had given him, but turned backwards so her initials could not be seen. In January 2025, a fan asked Jessica if she and Bruno had split. She answered indirectly, saying she would always celebrate his success and cheer for him from afar. The comment spread quickly. That same holiday season, she spent Christmas with her parents in San Juan, while Bruno performed in Las Vegas. It was their first Christmas apart in over 10 years. They have never officially confirmed a breakup. They still follow each other online and still co-own their Studio City home. But something had clearly changed. At the same time, another storm hit Bruno's name. In March 2024, News Nation aired an unsourced report claiming he owed MGM Resorts $50 million in gambling debt. The rumor exploded online. MGM quickly denied it, telling major outlets that Bruno owed no debt and that their relationship was built on mutual respect. Bruno never gave a serious public denial. Instead, he turned the rumor into a joke. During shows and social media posts, he teased the debt story until the scandal lost its power. Every punchline made the rumor feel smaller, and every viral clip sold more tickets. Still, people close to him say one detail is real. Bruno reportedly carries a $5,000 casino chip in his pocket during every show. He treats it as a lucky chip and refuses to cash it in. That detail cuts deeper, because gambling was already part of Bruno's childhood story. Sources in Hawaii have claimed his father, Pete Hernandez, struggled with gambling in the 1980s. Some rumors even suggest the Waikiki home Bruno's family lost when he was 12 may not have been lost through ordinary foreclosure, but through a bad poker hand. A close friend once claimed Bruno did not see himself as addicted to gambling, but as addicted to the feeling of controlling something he could never truly control. If that is true, then buying back the Waikiki home in 2016 was more than a gift to his father. It was Bruno trying to reclaim the exact piece of childhood his family had lost. And it may also be the first painful sign that Bruno was walking toward the same darkness he had spent his whole life trying to escape. The Man in the Gold Tuxedo. In 2019, at a small hospital in the United States, the medical bills for a child fighting leukemia were quietly paid by an anonymous donor. The family only learned later that the donor was allegedly Bruno Mars, after a hospital staff member let it slip. The child's mother posted a tearful thank you online. Bruno never confirmed it. He never denied it. That is the kind of thing he does quietly. And that is what makes his story so painful. Bruno Mars is now a 39-year-old man sitting on top of a music empire. But behind the gold tuxedo is still the boy who once slept in the back of a yellow Cadillac. He is the son who lost his mother at the height of his fame and never got to say goodbye. He is the artist who may be losing the woman who stood beside him for 13 years, and he may be fighting the same demons that once broke his father. Still, every night he walks on stage. He smiles, he dances, he turns private pain into songs the whole world sings. But when someone spends his entire life making heartbreak sound beautiful, who is left to notice his own? Maybe that gold tuxedo is not just a symbol of success. Maybe it is armor. If you have followed this story from the yellow Cadillac in Waikiki to the Grammy stage, leave a comment below. Which Bruno Mars song helped you through your darkest moment? Because maybe that same song was written while he was surviving his.